In this lesson, we are really getting into the meat of what it means to do bookkeeping in QuickBooks Online. And what I mean by that is we are going to start adding transactions from the bank feed center. So in the previous video, I showed you how to match transactions. And again, that works if you have a client or if you're doing the bookkeeping and you are recording certain transactions manually in QuickBooks Online before they clear the bank account. So now I want to talk about all those other transactions that we aren't recording until they've already hit the bank account and now we need to categorize them. So, a couple of notes from the Bank Feed Center. Always click the gear icon and make sure that you have Show Bank Details and Copy Bank Detail to Memo selected before you start working. The reason that's really important, let's say that I oops and I had this transaction right here and I forgot to put in my payee and I didn't change the account and I hit add. Or maybe I put in the wrong payee or I made an oops on the transaction. Now later when I'm checking my work, because we do have a review process that we go through, if I don't have any information entered for that vendor or for that transaction, if I don't have a description right here, I can't tell. So like say this wasn't here, all I would see is like, oh, we have this deposit of $200 that hit the checking account and it went to uncategorized income and I don't know anything about it. And so then you'd have to go to the bank, go to the bank statements or go to your bank account and try to figure out what was this transaction, or worse, go to your client and say, oh my gosh, I entered this transaction, but I don't know what it is or why I entered it this way. So actually, first I'm going to delete this transaction so that way it goes back in the bank feed. Something cool to point out. If you have a transaction that comes through the bank feeds and then you delete it later, it's going to put it right back here in your bank feeds again. So we make sure that we have the bank detail on. We use that bank detail to then figure out who we are, in this case, receiving money from. So our payee in this case is A1 Rental. Now, I also want to point out something. The sample file comes with some nice tricky scenarios right off the get-go. So you'll notice that A1 Rental has money out and money in transactions. So thinking about it logically, this Craig's Landscape and Design, they're a landscaping company, so they're probably renting a backhoe, which would be money that they're spending. So what this tells me is that we had a backhoe rental and we had a couple of transactions here that we paid out. And then maybe we returned it early and we got a discount or a refund. For some reason, they gave us $200 back. Now, because A1 Rental is not already here as a vendor, which you can tell by searching here, they don't exist. So I'm going to type in the name, A1 Rental. I'm going to click on Add New. And again, because this transaction, I'm recording it straight from the bank feeds, I'm not going to, one, have the information, or two, bother putting in things like their email and their phone number and their address. I typically only do that for clients if we are actually printing checks for those vendors. All right, so A1 Rental. Now, I also know that it's going to be some sort of equipment rental. What's tricky with this client? Look at this. They have equipment rental as an expense, and they have equipment rental as a subcategory of job expenses. So sometimes you're going to have to ask the client, hey, why do we have two of these accounts? How do I know which one to use when? So they might have an equipment rental that they tie directly to a job and that we bill the customer for, like they bill their customer for. And maybe we have equipment rentals that are more broad and apply to the company and we don't put them to specific jobs. So again, that's just one possible scenario. We're going to assume here that I am the client here and that I'm giving you the answer. And we're going to assume that it's a sub of job expenses. All right. And then because it's a sub of job expenses, we're going to assume that it applies to a specific customer. And so in this case, I'm going to choose Amy's Bird Sanctuary. Now, another cool feature that we have here in QuickBooks, let's say that I want to bill this rental back to Amy. So maybe I'm doing a time and materials job for Amy. And so I'm going to mark this box as billable. And then when I go to create my invoices for Amy's Bird Sanctuary, it's going to remind me, hey, you paid $1,200 to A1 Rental for her job. Don't forget to bill her. All right, I know that was a lot for adding your first transaction. One thing we're going to skip, tags. These are going away in QuickBooks Online anyway. By the time you're watching this, they might not even exist for you. We're going to make sure this memo is here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click add on this first transaction because I want to show you then. Now you'll notice that these A1 rentals, it's recognized for this second one here that this is the same payee. So previously it didn't have A1 rental listed because we didn't have the vendor created, and now we do. You can also see that here the words are written in green. So when you see words written in green in the Bank Feed Center, that means the last time you recorded a transaction to this vendor, this is the account you used, which is very helpful because in general, I used to do this the hard way. I used to have to go expenses and then click on vendors, open that vendor up in a new tab. Then I'd go search for my vendor, A1 rental, and I'd go look at the transaction history to see how have we historically recorded transactions to this vendor. Now, sometimes I still do that because I don't necessarily want to know just the last time. I make sure that we code our transactions to that vendor the same way every time. Because if I have a vendor where sometimes it's job supplies and sometimes it's material, like if it's different categories, then I know I need to ask the client to confirm, how do I know which category to put this to? And as a bookkeeper, that's a really important thing to be able to do is ask the client when you need to, how do I know which category to use? So we use history to help us create rules and make it easier. And then QuickBooks has added this here, which again is going to help us out. So if I click on categorization history here, what's fun is we have most used, which again, I don't use most used because if there's ever exceptions, then I'm going to ask the client every single time. But we have most used and we have last used. So we can see what we coded to the last time, which again, we already know because the words were written in green. But then we also could sort by most used just to see. And then there's a drop down here for the details so we can see other transactions. And I think their goal there is to just save you from, having to do what I did manually and go to the vendor and review the transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and click assign category. Now the other cool thing we can do is we could create a rule. So if we know that A1 rental is always going to go under job expenses, equipment rental, we could click on create a rule here. We'd have to name the rule. So I like to name the rule my vendor. So A1 rental. It applies to money out transactions in the checking account, but you could also choose all bank accounts. It really doesn't matter. Again, it's going to be a situation that depends on each client, right? If the description contains a rental. Now, I actually wanted to say A1 rental, I would think, because what if there's other rental companies? So that's the hard part about the rules is if I put A1 rental, it applies to none. If we just do a rental, then it's going to apply to one. So rules are not perfect. They don't always work. Sometimes it's hard to come up with a good description that's going to apply. Because like you can see here, my bank memo is A1 rental. And yet for some reason, when I put A1 rental here and test the rule, it says it's going to apply to 0. So you take rules with a grain of salt. When they work, great. But when they don't, that's okay. We're just going to use our history. All right, so A1 rental, it's important when adding transactions. Always make sure you have a vendor or customer. Try to be consistent with the account categorization. And if you don't know the answer, I like to use an account called Ask Client. So I make an expense account for all my bookkeeping clients, Ask Client, and I put all the transactions that I need to get feedback from them on in one single account. And then we use our accountants tool to batch reclassify those transactions. And we have the answers. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on add. Now there's one other feature that I didn't get to show you here, so let me just click on this transaction here. And so this one's a deposit. It's for A1 rental, so we know it's a refund probably of something that we've already paid for. Since we're using equipment rental every single time, I can go ahead and use that expense account. But let's say that there's actually, maybe this is a refund and it applies to multiple customers or multiple jobs or something, and we need to split it out, or maybe it applies to multiple categories. You can actually split a transaction. So obviously in this case, it's only one vendor, so they both have to be A1 rental for our received from. So, and again, QuickBooks is weird sometimes. You can see A1 rental is showing in that list, but we can't get A1 rental popping up for some reason, so I had to scroll to find it. Okay, so maybe part of it was job expenses equipment, and maybe part of this refund applied to something else, like, I don't know, equipment repairs. I'm just, again, just making things up. So maybe it was $150 for that part and 50 for the other part. So you actually can split the transaction. You can add an attachment, so attach your receipt. You can add as many lines as you want to. And again, I'm just demonstrating the feature here. This may or may not be the most relevant example, but I just want to show you that you do have the option if you need to split a transaction. You don't have to use just one expense account. Now, what that didn't give us the option to do, and I think that's because it was money received, is put it to multiple customers. So let's see if we have any. Here's one, Hicks Hardware. So let me just demonstrate really quick. We are going to split this one. And now, because it's an expense, we can actually split it between multiple customers if we wanted to. We can mark it billable. And then we also have the option of splitting up the products and services here as well. So just wanted to show you really quick what that looks like. Very, very cool, fairly straightforward. So, all right. So now what we would do here, so we've added our, we've gone over adding transactions, matching transactions, viewing. And of course, the thing we didn't talk about is that what you would do is you'd update your transactions every week or every month or every day, however often you want. And then you're going to come in here and you're going to just clear out this whole list. So you're going to go through, you're going to review every transaction, make sure it looks good. And what we want to do is we want to get this down to 0. So let's go through the savings here. Now, here's something interesting. I've added the transactions that are in the bank feeds, but my bank balance and my QuickBooks balance doesn't match. Now that can happen. There can be transactions that we've manually created in QuickBooks, but the vendor hasn't cashed the check yet, or the deposit hasn't cleared the bank account yet, right? So there are genuine reasons for why your bank balance and your QuickBooks balance might not match. But if you want to investigate, just click on Go to Bank Register, and then you can look here. So this doesn't give us a great answer. So our bank balance is $200. Well, it does give us our answer actually. So typically what I'd see here is a whole bunch of transactions, and I sort by this column here, which tells me if it's been reconciled. So the R means it's been reconciled against the bank statement, and then cleared means it came through the bank feed. So you can see these two little green squares. That means the transaction was manually added from the bank feeds. Now, sometimes when you connect a new account to QuickBooks Online, if it has an opening balance, so if it's not pulling in the entire history, it has to pick a starting point. If there's an opening balance, QuickBooks automatically makes this opening balance journal entry. And in almost every scenario, I'm going to come in and I'm going to delete that entry because one, especially if I'm entering all of the historical transactions, maybe I'm importing them, what's missing from a CSV, I'm going to go ahead and remove this. Or I never want anything coded to opening balance equity. That's like your tax preparer, your CPA is going to flag that and say, what is this? That can't be there. And so you've got to either go back and record the transactions, or it's either if the owner contributed, you got to figure out where the money came from. So if it's a bank account that the owner basically is contributing extra funds to the business, we go to owner's equity or whatever it might be. So I'm going to click delete here on this transaction because again, I know it's a junk transaction that QuickBooks added to the file. And now when I go back to my bank transactions, you can see that my bank balance and my QuickBooks balance are now matching. All right, and then we do the same thing for the MasterCard. So typically with a credit card, I wouldn't expect to see transactions entered in advance. So for this client, you can see they've got matches, they've got multiple matches, and this is where it gets tricky. They're the same amount every single month to the same vendor. And so the way that I would choose is I'd say, well, this happened on 12/19. So I'm going to pick the credit card expense that's also dated 12/19. So again, we want to just be really, really clear. Top things to take away from these lessons. Always click this gear icon, turn on, show bank details, and copy bank detail to memo. When adding transactions, you only want to add transactions if you know for a fact it has not been previously created in QuickBooks Online. Otherwise, you want to make sure you are matching the transactions. And then if there are multiple matches, you're going to click on the word view, and you just want to use your logic to figure out which transaction is correct, so you make sure that you're always matching to the correct transaction in QuickBooks Online.